How's it going, guys? I'm here with Paul at the Southern Arizona Transportation Museum. This is Paul. He's going to be walking us through the cab and showing us what everything does.
Well, pretty much we'll start on the fireman side. You've got the injector controls. This is your, you turn it on, get your water flow. Once you get a water flow, then you come out on this. Oh, it's actually out, I think. I got to get a handle on that.
Right.
But that actually is what causes the injector to pick up and start throwing water down.
Right.
Your valves. This is actually the fireman's control valve for the bell.
Right.
This is blower.
Right.
This is your atomizer. These are tank heater lines coming up, or not tank heater, but the heater lines and stuff for the line coming across. This is your tank heater down here.
Awesome. Keeps the oil warm in the winter, huh?
No, you got to pretty much heat it up anytime because it has to be above 120 degrees.
Right, it gets sticky.
To get it to flow.
Right, I got you.
You got your main steam gauge here. This particular locomotive is 190 pounds operating pressure.
Nice.
So that's where your fireman's trying to keep it up to. This is your water glass. The recommended setting for this is about half a glass.
Right.
Because if you get too low, down in here, right down in here, is where the top of the firebox is. You want to keep water over the top of the firebox at all times.
Right.
Otherwise, bad things happen. You don't want to get it too high either, because if you get it too high in there, the throttle valve is inside the boiler, up underneath the steam dome.
Right.
If you get water too high, it can slop over into the dry pipe, and once you get water into the dry pipe, it's going to turn to steam. And if it turns to steam while you're in a confined place, you lose control of the engine. It becomes a wild engine.
Right.
Because there's nothing you can do. You just got to let it boil out.
Yeah, which wouldn't be good. I mean, would it be possible that you could use the blowdown or maybe the cylinder cocks to get that out? Or is that possible? Or
to a certain extent, yeah, but it's still going to just boil out.
Right.
This particular engine is superheated, so it goes through the dry pipe down to the superheater box.
Right.
Runs through the super units and then comes back up into the super box and then goes out to the cylinders.
Right, so you ain't got wet steam and less water to have to drain out, so pretty cool.
But then you got your auxiliary your auxiliary valves up here, fireman's manifold, the generator, the hydrostatic lubricator valve is missing. That's the big brass thing up there.
Right.
The pump is the air compressor, steam-driven air compressor.
Right.
And the water glass. There should be another one up here that has the water glass to turn on the flow to the valve or to the water glass.
Right, and if you had to change the glass, like say if the glass broke, then you would just shut it off up there, right? Is that how
Shut
you
it
would...
off there and shut it off here.
Right.
And that isolates it.
And also you could use that valve at the bottom to blow down the glass too to make sure the level's correct.
Actually,
right.
Well, this side's missing it. That side has both of the valves.
Right.
So when you operate the thing, you'd have this one turned on all the time.
Right.
This one would be shut until you wanted to check your gauge.
Right.
And then you would open it part way, and then you open this to blow the water out of this that's in there already,
Right.
and shut it off, and watch for where it bounces to up in here, and it'll eventually stop bouncing. So you
Right.
can tell your actual water height.
Right. Yeah, and that's pretty cool. And those are your tricocks,
These
correct?
are tricocks. If something happens to both water glasses, you can still use these to tell where your water height is.
Right.
If you're getting water out of this one, you're good. If you're just getting steam out of this one, you're in trouble.
Right. Yeah, you're in big trouble. That's the bottom of the boiler, right?
Yeah,
That's the crown sheet.
You notice it's just about lined up with the bottom of the water glass.
Right.
This one, if you're getting water out of it, your water level's too high, you can let it boil for a while and boil out some of that water.
Right. And I would assume that this red deal here, that's the main plug going into the boiler, right? Is that the plug or?
This is just a wrench for washout plugs.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I was saying. Like that behind
Well,
there
you've
would be the
got-
washout plug, right?
Yeah,
Those-
this is a washout plug. There's another washout plug there and one over there.
Right.
You have a number of them throughout the boiler
Right.
because about every 30 days, sometimes sooner, and especially down here in Arizona, because the water had so much calcium in it, you'd have to wash boilers. You'd take out all those plugs and stuff after you shut down the engine,
Right.
dropped all the steam out of it, drop all the water out of it. And you either take a steam lance or a high pressure hose and go in there and try to knock as much of that calcium deposit off as possible.
Right.
These from here up, right about here is the top of the firebox.
Nice.
So these are rivets that hold stays across the top of the firebox to keep the boiler from moving around too much.
Right.
These are what they call flexible stay bolts. These are what they call rigid stay bolts.
Okay.
The difference is a rigid stay bolt is riveted over on both ends,
Okay.
and that hole that's in there is actually a gun drilled hole that goes all the way through that stay bolt.
Right.
And the reason for that is if that bolt breaks for any reason, it'll weep water out of that hole because you got to keep those holes cleaned out. And sometimes
Okay.
it can be a real job to do that because the wasps and stuff like to build their nest in there, put their.
Oh wow.
The flexible stay bolts, on the other hand, they're riveted over on the inside of the firebox, but this one runs through a tapered sleeve and has a ball on the end of it so that there is some movement in there, because if you tried to lock this thing down tight, you would be breaking bolts,
Right.
because the amount of movement in the firebox is such that you just can't tie it all down solid.
Right.
Okay, you've got, this is your forward reverse, Johnson bar, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Down here on the floor, this locomotive has, on both sides, it has blowdowns so that you can blow down the around the mud ring.
Right. Get all of that sludge out.
Yeah, as much as possible.
That's a blowdown.
This is your independent, controls just the locomotive,
Right.
brake stand. This one is incomplete. It should have about 4 more courses on it. And
Right.
that's your train brake. And
Right.
so you're probably saying, well, why do you need the independent when you can use your train brake and stop the locomotive also? Well, there's times when you want to play the two of them against each other.
Right.
You may want to have the engine still rolling free, with the train brake on. So you apply the brake on the train brake, and it starts to set up the engine brake.
Right.
But you can take the engine brake and put it over to release and release the brakes on the engine and let it still roll free.
Right, and that's referred to, just a side note, that's referred to today as bell off, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, most locomotives have a bell off position there.
Yeah. And like I say, this is your forward reverse. This is your, we refer to it as a throttle.
Right.
The English refer to it as
Regulator.
a regulating valve,
Right.
which is actually more correct because that's what it does. It regulates the amount of steam that's allowed out of the boiler into the dry pipe to go down to the valves and cylinder.
Right, makes sense.
So this is your hydrostatic lubricator. It's missing a couple parts here, but these two go to the fireman's side, these two go to the engineer's side, and this center one is the lubrication for the air compressor.
Right.
You got 3 gauges up here. You got another steam gauge, so that the engineer doesn't have to try to crane his neck around and see the one on the fireman's side.
Right.
The 2 air gauges, the fireman doesn't have to worry about that, but they tell you the how much pressure you're putting into the brake pipe for the locomotive or whatever.
Right.
The other one does your air brake compressor or your air reservoir pressures and so forth. And
right.
And then you also have a hand on there. There's 2 hands on each one of those. They're called duplex gauges.
Right.
Because they have two hands on them, and they do 2 different functions on each one.
Right.
And that's pretty much it. These valves here, this is a valve so you can start the air ringer on the bell ringing from the engineer side if you have to.
Right.
And there's another valve that should be in here, and these 2 valves are the sander valves.
Okay.
This one, after you get running, would go to this position. This is your cylinder cocks. When you got it in line, it opens the cylinder cocks and allows the an opening in the bottom of the cylinder. So when you first start out, if you have a lot of condensation in the cylinder, if you just tried to compress that, you'd probably blow the cylinder heads off.
Right.
This allows the cylinders to be blown out, get rid of the excess or the water and stuff in the cylinder, and then after a while you can close it off because it'll vaporize or re-vaporize or whatever any condensation you get in there.
Right, and I've also heard it's true as well that you can take and open the cylinder clocks whenever you're just sitting idle and crack the throttle a bit, and it'll keep them heated up and reduce the amount of condensation as well.
What are you doing?
Another thing you can do, some railroads did it and some didn't, is you can do what you call mountain braking. It kind of acts like a dynamic brake. What you do is you open the cylinder cocks.
Right.
You put the engine, if you're running forward, you put it just a couple notches back of center.
Right.
Into the backward motion, and you give it just a tad of steam.
Right.
And that'll cause a back pressure condition that'll cause your cylinders to not move as easily, and it'll act as a braking system.
Right, that makes sense. It's preventing them from moving forward as fast and stuff like that. Yeah.
But it's,
Can you ring the bell?
yeah.
Come here, bro. Sorry, dude.
Alrighty, well, thank you for walking us through this whole cab here, Paul. Like I said, it's the 1673 Southern Pacific.